Sometimes, as we've talked about, this is the second part of making the right call. Making those calls is tough. It can be challenging. As a believer in this day and age, trying to figure out how to navigate through all the issues, whether they're social or economical or racial or whatever it might be, you try to balance grace and truth. You try to walk in love moving forward, and it's not always easy. Jesus told us in Matthew chapter 7, in making that right call, he tells us in the first 6 verses that we need to deal with sin rightly. Yes, we need to make calls. We need to use discernment, but we have to be careful of a judgmental attitude, as he points out there, that's with condemnation towards others. We have to be careful of the critical attitude that no longer is there grace ruling my life, but it's kind of sour. And we stop walking in love, and we stop giving space for the Holy Spirit to just work in people's preferences. And then he talks about in verse 6 about we have to be careful of being willful and just pushing, and not recognizing that there are times when you just need to walk away. So in making those right calls, you have to deal with sin. You can't just ignore it. You need to deal with it, but there's a right way and a wrong way to do that. And then he tells us in verses 7 through 12 that we need to bathe things in prayer. That we need to pray rightly. We need to pray intelligently. We need to ask God for his wisdom and his will in the things that we're facing, because we want to make those right calls. And when God gives us his wisdom and shows us his will, then now will we walk in that counsel. Even though we don't have it figured out, we still go, Lord, I'm going to trust you, and go forward. But there's one more area that we want to talk about today in making those right calls, and that is this. In making the right call, here's your take home, I need and must exercise discernment. Key word there, discernment. What is discernment? Discernment is that ability to distinguish between right and wrong according to God's standard. It's recognizing a moral implication of a certain direction or decision. Let me illustrate it this way. There was a man who wanted to impress his friends with his eye for art. And so they all went to this art gallery together. But as he went there, he forgot his glasses. This man was nearsighted, so he couldn't see his hand in front of his face. But he thought, well, I can just kind of wing my way. I can kind of make it through. And so he went there, and he saw this particular frame. And he went up and observed, and he approached it, and he just began to critique things. And he said this, why would anyone want to paint something so hideous and ugly? I mean, it's true rendering of the object, but why waste time painting such a disgusting subject? And his wife was next to him, and everybody started laughing and snickering, and his wife turned to him and said, John, it's a mirror. Discernment takes clarity, and so that you can respond rightly with tact and wisdom. And that's what we need. In chapter 7, verse 6, he does give that discernment. Don't cast your pearls before swine, right? Use discernment, know when to walk away. And we read in John chapter 2 that Jesus exampled discernment for us. It says there in verse 24 and 25, he would not entrust himself to them, for he knew what was in men. So we need discernment as we walk through life to assess things and make those right calls. But what does that look like for us today? Well, the first thing you might note in verse 13 and 14 is we need to discern the path that we are on. Jesus says, enter by the narrow gate, for wide is the gate and broad is the way that leads to destruction. And there are many who go in by it, because narrow is the gate and difficult, or oh, how difficult is the way which leads to life, and there are few who find it. Every walled city in Jesus' day had a gate by which you would enter in. Sometimes multitudes of gates to get in and out of. Some were larger than others. Some were smaller than others. But Jesus uses this illustration to carry across a few spiritual principles. The first one is this. Not everyone goes to heaven. Now, maybe a shocker to you, because we want to believe that all people go to heaven. I mean, hell is just for the really, really bad guys who do the really, really bad things. But if I'm a good, moral person and I haven't killed anybody, don't I deserve heaven? As if heaven is an entitlement for us. And Jesus meant to correct that misunderstanding. Heaven is not entitled to you. Why? Because you didn't make the rules. God did. And if God made the rules, he has the ability and the authority to say, this is how it works. We may like it, we may not like it, but the reality is heaven is not our entitlement. Heaven is the reward of faith for following his way. Secondly, Jesus points out here is that a striking thing. There are more in hell than there are in heaven. That's kind of scary when you think about it. Notice what he uses. He uses these words, many compared with few. Narrow and difficult compared with broad and wide. Society says, God, you're so narrow-minded. Well, here's the reality. Yes. But God's narrowness is not because he's afraid that man is going to rebel in some way or that man is going to do something and he's got control issues on men or something like that. No, his narrowness is because of great love for you. Think about if you were in a fire as a father and your kid and you're going, hey, listen, kid, follow my voice, grab my hand, we're getting out of this, there's one way. Right? The father doesn't say, figure it out, hopefully you'll survive. And this is that reality. One way, one person, one goal, salvation. And men say, no way, that's restrictive, that's intolerant. That's so narrow-minded. Oh, it can't be that easy. In fact, I'll figure it out my own. And it always leads to this, trouble and confusion. I was having lunch with a friend yesterday, and we were at this Chinese restaurant, and we pulled out the fortune cookies, and I can't remember what mine said, but I do remember what his said. His said this, many roads lead to the top of the mountain, but all end up having one view. And I thought, that's fine physically, but spiritually that doesn't work. That doesn't work. He gave us clarity. Many roads lead to confusion and sin. One road leads to clarity and salvation. It's called Jesus' way. Jesus said this, John 14:6. You've probably memorized it. I am the what? The way, the truth, and the life. Then he said something absolutely astounding. No one. That doesn't mean 99.9%. It says no one, 100%. No one comes to the Father except through me. Wow, that's a pretty absolute. This is what the Bible teaches. The good news is we can change paths. We can, by placing our faith in Jesus Christ, we can go from that broad way that is leading to destruction to found that narrow way of Jesus, which leads to life and getting into heaven. The third thing he tells us there in those two verses is almost like he gave these facts and then says, which road are you on? Which road are you on? Which way are you taking? Are you watching where you are going? Where your feet are traveling? I was in 7th grade. I think I shared this before, but I was in 7th grade. I was heading to Dairy Queen with some friends. It's at night, and I'm traveling down, and I'm throwing this ball in the air, and I'm just, minding my own business. Next thing I know, I'm sucking dirt on my face. My friends are laughing. I tripped over a fire hydrant. Now, usually you may trip over a curb, but fire hydrants are pretty big, and yeah, they hurt. But I learned this lesson. Keep your eyes looking forward where you're going. Number 2, as we look at things, we have to discern our path and the people. Number 2, discern the people around you. Who's in your company? Who's speaking into your life? Who's influencing, and what example are you following? And that's number 2, discern the people around you. Look at verse 15. Jesus says, beware of false prophets who come to you in sheep's clothing, but inwardly they are ravenous wolves. You will know them by their fruits. Do men gather grapes from thorn bush or figs from thistles? Even so, every good tree bears good fruit, but a bad tree bears bad fruit. A good tree cannot bear bad fruit, nor can a bad tree bear good fruit. Every tree that does not bear good fruit is cut down and thrown into the fire. Therefore, by their fruits you will know them. So Jesus pinpoints the danger of false teachers and false prophets. They're going to claim a position. They're going to have a power and an influence over others. And if you're not careful, you can be led astray down some wrong roads that cause some great destruction. So how do you pinpoint? How do you guard yourself from those falsities? Well, he gives us a few things to look out for. Number 1 is we have to understand they're in disguise. Verse 15. They come to you in sheep's clothing, but inwardly they are ravenous wolves. Understand they're in disguise. It's not always easy to tell. They don't walk around with a, hello, my name is false teacher, false prophet. How you doing? There's not certain garb that they're dressed in. They'll say things. They'll do all the Christian jargon words and stuff, but they're not sheep. They're bad, They're wolves. I had to do it, Wolves in sheep's clothing is what it says there. They appearing to be one thing, but quite dangerous. So how do I know? How do I tell the difference between a sheep and a wolf? Well, one of the ways that you might consider is just by looking at what they eat. Wolves eat sheep. Sheep eat grass. And so one of the things you can look at is, well, what are they feeding off of? What are they doing? Who are they ripping off of life and stealing away the rest and peace in Jesus? So in your discernment, you want to discern their claims and their actions. Is it lining up with the Word of God? Number 2, you want to inspect the fruits. Verse 16 through 20 talk about that. And a fruit is simply what comes forth of the life. You want to look at their message publicly, because what they're preaching or what they're saying should reveal something to you. Luke chapter 6, verse 45, Jesus said, a good man out of the good treasures of his heart brings forth good. And an evil man out of the evil treasures of his heart brings forth evil. And then he says, out of the abundance of the heart, the mouth speaks. So what is that message that they're promoting? Is it an exaltation of Jesus, or is it something else? You want to be aware of that. Do they lead me to more of a bondage and a legalism, or a freedom and a grace in Jesus? Are they preaching a false theology that is against what the Bible tells us, which means I need to be reading the Bible in order to use that discernment? Number 2, not only look at their message publicly, but look at their character personally. What's their attitude and motive for what they do? Is it glorifying God, or does it glorify self? Interesting, in 2 Timothy, one of the traits of the last days, the first thing it says there, 2 Timothy chapter 3, in the last days, men will be, the first thing he lists is lovers of self. Of course, it's been there all the time, but now it's just promoted more and more and more. And so you ask yourself, is there humility or pride that is seen from that life? Unfortunately, just being real with you, unfortunately, the pulpit can be a pride pit, can be a power pit. There's a reason why there's a pit at the end of pole. There is a pull to a pit if you're not careful. God has called those who lead to walk in humility, to walk in servanthood, to be that example in showing love and grace and pointing people to Jesus. They're not to rule over harshly. They're to undergird and lead lovingly. And we have to be careful in our day. We need to be careful of the message. We need to be careful of the character. We need to be careful, number 3, of the actions. What's seen in the actions? As they seek to lord over, they're not serving the church. They're looking to rip it off and gain selfishly, focused on material things often and power trips over others. So we need to be careful. And he tells us there, and this is really a kingdom principle to make this connection with, is that the fruit reveals the root, and the root bears the fruit. That's how they work together. That's a kingdom principle. The root and the fruit all go together. And we understand this even in nature, as he points out in verse 16. It's not in the DNA of thorn bushes to bring forth figs and grapes. Or thistles. That's not in there. And so we see this in nature that a bad tree, a good tree, has a good ground, and it brings forth good fruit. And a bad tree that is rotten and diseased, it's not going to bring forth good fruit. It's going to bring forth bad fruit. And we see that in nature, and we can tell ourselves that that's true spiritually as well. A false prophet who claims to speak for God, but doesn't claim that foundation of Jesus Christ as Lord and Savior, run away. The fruit is going to be bad. We need to be on our guard. We need to recognize that appearance does not always equal authenticity. many of you guys have been out to Sun City? I haven't been there in a long, long time. Maybe you're looking for a house and you're heading out that way. But for a long time ago, I don't even know if they still have these. A long time ago, down Bell Road, they had these orange trees as you head down there. And people would stop and go, oh, look at the oranges, let's go pick them. But they're all fake. And who would put fake orange trees in a retirement community? The same people who paint the rocks green. Sorry, I'm not going down that road. But you have to be careful because things that look authentic aren't always the real deal. Not always the real deal. In verse 19, he says there, every tree that does not bear good fruit, here's the judgment, it's cut down and thrown into the fire. God will discern, and God will have the final word. So discern the claims and action, discern the fruits and foundation. Discernment is needed in making right calls in life. We have to have it. We have to discern the path that we are on and where we're going, and we have to discern the people around us that are having an influence into our life. Number 3, discern the personal relationship with Jesus. Look at verse 21. Not everyone who says to me, Lord, Lord, shall enter the kingdom of heaven, but he who does the will of my Father in heaven. Many will say to me in that day, Lord, Lord, have we not prophesied in your name, cast out demons in your name, and done many wonders in your name? And then I will declare to them, I never knew you. Depart from me, you who practice lawlessness. Now this is on the heels of recognizing a false prophet, a false teacher. That these things are there. They don't truly know Jesus. A false religion can say and do good things. They'll do many moral things. They'll have maybe some great programs and things that are helpful in the community and everything, but the theology is cracked. It's wrong. It's a bad foundation. The fruits are off practically, and their relation with Christ is not existent. People may say, oh, but look at all the good that's happening, though. How could that be so wrong? There's a little fish, and you remember from Finding Nemo, the puffer fish. Blows up. But when looking at the puffer fish, it has incredible toxins in it. One fish could kill 30 people. That's sketchy. And so you have to be careful of the puff. Getting puffed up with pride. Because then you go down. Stay away from people who get puffed up. It's a deadly end. So he says there, these 3 things. 1, they're going to use right verbiage. It says they're going to call him Lord, Lord. It's actually emphatic and emotional, and it still doesn't count. You may know the right verbiage to say, but if you don't have that relationship with Christ, it doesn't matter. They'll use the right verbiage. They'll claim, number 2, great actions for themselves. I mean, these guys have a supernatural resume, better than me. Look at verse 22. Have we not prophesied in your name, cast out demons in your name, and done many wonders in your name? Whew, I'd be like, dude, that's pretty legit. But as impressive as it is, Jesus still says the same thing. Your actions never replace that relation. They've missed what's most important. That reality sinks in that men can have a religious form without having a relationship with God. Think about Judas. Oh man, he was right there. He called Jesus Lord. He was numbered with the disciples. He was used in ministry, but he didn't have a personal relationship with Jesus. Listen, Judas didn't lose his salvation. He didn't even have it in the first place. And so we see those examples, and then verse 23 tells us that day of judgment will be a shock to some when he says, I never knew you. Depart from me, you who practice lawlessness. Your lifestyle, there was never a decision, never a change, never a pursuit of the things of God. And we note these 2 heavy realities from this section. That religious works don't earn me favors with God. Let that sink in a little bit. That God may use you for spiritual work and wonders. It doesn't erase your sin or give you points with God on that final day. Many people still live, they'll go to church, but they'll live the rest of their life in sin, and they'll just be in bondage to sin and do what they want. And they think, oh, as long as I show up on Sunday, I'm good to go. False. Let me share with you this reality. On a church wall in Germany, it says this. You call me master and obey me not. You call me light and see me not. You call me the way and walk me not. You call me life and choose me not. You call me wise and follow me not. You call me fair and love me not. You call me rich and ask me not. You call me eternal and seek me not. You call me noble and serve me not. You call me gracious and trust me not. You call me mighty and honor me not. You call me just and fear me not. If I condemn you, blame me not. It's a poke to remind us, let our profession match our possession. Relationship matters most. And the second word that is important for us to consider is the final word belongs to Jesus. Notice that it says, I, verse 23, will declare to them, I never knew you. At the beginning of Jesus' ministry, he puts himself as the judge of all men, the judge of all humanity. John 5:22 says this, moreover, Jesus said, the Father judges no one, but has entrusted all judgment to the Son, that all may honor the Son just as they honor the Father. Whoever does not honor the Son does not honor the Father who sent him. So what matters most in the end is knowing Jesus personally, a personal relationship. Without that foundation, without that relationship, the good works that we do, the religious claims that we make, they don't matter at all. They're meaningless. Jesus ends his sermon with this section, how to build lasting faith. Verse 24, therefore, whoever hears these sayings of mine and does them, I will liken him to a wise man who built his house on the rock. And the rain descended, and the flood came, and the winds blew and beat on that house, and it did not fall, for it was founded on the rock. But everyone who hears these sayings of mine and does not do them will be like a foolish man who built his house on the sand. The rain descended, and the floods came, and the winds blew and beat on that house, and it fell, and great was its fall. The book of James tells us we need to be doers of the word and not hearers only. We can hear it, but are we doing it? The Christian life has a must to it. I'm not only here, but I must do it and apply it. It's inevitable. Without it, we are building upon sinking sand instead of a solid rock, right? And eventually everything will collapse. But if you look at this little story, you notice three things. First, both men built something. They both built a house, right? With the same materials, we might say. Something they saw as lasting, valuable, and needful. See, everybody is building something. The question is, what are you building on, and will it last? Number two, both men faced a storm beating upon that structure. You see, whether you're a Christian or not, you're going to have storms in life. Trials will happen. The Christian just has a solid rock foundation of which to be stable upon, where the unbeliever doesn't. Trials will come your way, whether it's through the attacks of the enemy, whether it's through hardships from the world. Sometimes the Lord will even allow trials to test you. Listen, when God tests your faith, sometimes we always think that it's to show us our failures. But you realize the intent of God's test on your faith is for you to succeed? Yes, a lot of times we fail, but it's to reveal what's strong in your life. You may be saying, why are all these bad things happening to me? Have you ever thought about the reality is maybe because you're on the right track? The enemy doesn't like it. The trials are there to trouble you and throw you off. But it's testing your foundation, your character, your godly traits within you. Will you trust in the Lord and say, God, the storm's raging, but I'm looking to you, and I'm standing upon your word, and Jesus, I know I got heaven, and that is what matters most. Don't be shaken. Both men faced the beating on the structure. And number three, only one house stood, and that because of the foundation. The most important rock is at the lowest. The sandy foundation could not stand, could not hold up to the wind and the waves. And that oftentimes, it's what happens. It says, great was its fall. We've all been to the beach. We built those sand castles, but we recognize that there will be a wave that comes in and takes this puppy out, right? But so often people face life almost looking as if there shouldn't be any waves. God, why are you allowing this wave in my life? Why are you allowing this rocking of my boat? Because he's testing you. Where's your foundation? And too often what happens is people have a foundation that is a pebble of this idea and a little grain of that idea and this feeling and that issue of stuff. And so when that storm hits, there's collapsing. Ultimate storm comes when the day of Jesus calls us to judgment and to give account for our life. The only foundation that lasts is Jesus Christ. Build your life upon the solid work of him. Lastly, verse 28 and 29 as we close, I want you to see this. And so it was when Jesus had ended these sayings that the people were astonished at his teaching. For he taught them as one having authority and not as the scribes. Mouth just dropped. Here is what made Jesus so different from the other scribes and Pharisees. The other scribes and Pharisees would quote, this rabbi and that rabbi. Jesus had authority. He had power. The people were in awe. It says in Isaiah 61 that the Spirit of the Lord was upon him and he would preach the good news and do all these other things. And so the work and the ministry of Jesus just caused them to go, whoa. And I would tell you this reality is that when the Bible is taught with authority and the power of the Spirit of God is present, and people are brought to see Jesus as the answer to what they're facing and what they're going through, then ultimately men stand in awe of the work and the word of Jesus in their lives. Our goal as a church, as we have it there, love God, love one another, share Jesus. But our goal as a church is that when you leave here each Sunday, that you've come face to face with the living God. And you walk out of here saying, God, keep changing me and making me more like Jesus. Because then we know we've done our part. Then we know that no matter what trials you face and no matter what issues you're going through right now, you have stability because he's got you in his hand and you're looking towards him. You spend time worshiping God and we're studying his word to know his will, but ultimately we want to leave here going, Jesus, thank you for loving me so much. I want to stand in awe of my King who has incredible things to say to me, who tells me in his Sermon on the Mount at the beginning, and in one sense, how to be happy in life with these attitudes, and then takes me through all these practical things, and at the end he says, build your life upon my word, and you'll be safe. Man, we need it in our day and age. And there's so many things flying around here, there, and everywhere. Sink your anchor into Jesus, and you'll be safe. Doesn't mean there won't be any storms, but you'll be safe. Build your house upon the rock of Jesus Christ. Let's pray.